Hello and welcome to another Register Kettle, your chance to hear about the news from the people that actually write it. Now, it's been a busy week in Taiwan and we've had a vulture on the ground because it's the Computex show and the world's computing and power is being displayed in front of mass crowds. Simon, you're there at the moment. What's it like?
Computex is astounding and exhausting. It's an assault on the senses. It's staged in this massive convention center that's just behind me there in the dawn light. 7 stories on both sides, 4 floors of trade show, and this kind of enormous migration of people in and out of the keynote addresses to hear the titans of Taiwanese industry strut it on the world stage. It's extraordinary. You have giant global mega brands sitting next to tiny, obscure manufacturers of metal Ethernet connectors. It's a panoply of tech. It's weird and it's wonderful. Yeah, and it's in a great town. Taiwan is famous for its night markets, where you kind of stroll down a street that at about 5 or 6 p.m. transforms into this extraordinary world of food. I went out to one last night, and on the street you see these kind of whole squid that have been flattened, so they look like a face hugger out of Alien, but the whole thing has been deep fried, and you can kind of buy one for a couple of bucks on a stick and just munch on it as you walk down the street.
You're making me hungry, Simon.
Yeah, sorry. It's an extraordinary event in an extraordinary place. And this year, I think it's been an extraordinary conference because we've had Nvidia tease its next platform in the form of Rubin. We've had Intel reveal its next server and client architecture, and we've had AMD do the same. And I cannot think of a tech conference at which 3 titans of enterprise tech have all released multi-year roadmaps for core platforms within 24 hours. It's been extraordinary.
I guess that's the power of AI. It's the power of AI. I guess that's what it took. That's what it's taken. That's what it's taken to spur everybody out of the COVID slowdown.
I think this is my 5th Computex, and they're always busy and there's always news here. But it's usually, Intel and AMD will announce some new client processors or some new gaming processors. This year, it's enormous and momentous.
The whole world plus dog syndrome coming in. I mean, I think the nearest might be Cebit in sort of the 1990s, early noughties, because there, everyone piled in as well. But A, it's in a much worse place, and B, it's almost defunct now. So, it sounds like you're having a good time.
I am. I've been working like a dog. I've only been out one night. Look at... Once Chris says my expenses...
Going around hostelries every night. We've seen your copy. We know it's good.
Yeah, look, I could turn my computer around and you can see the hookers and blow in my room here.
Okay, then.
Really.
Right.
Not really.
But I mean, you're right about the announcements. But Nvidia, okay, they've all announced stuff, but some people were coming in with new hardware. Nvidia basically has got a roadmap set out, which we've covered.
Yeah.
But it's basically these are the chips coming along next year because hey, we're already the boss. Everyone else is following us.
I'm going to let Tobias explain this in a minute, but it's important to know that Nvidia isn't actually officially at Computex. I'm staying in a hotel, that's about 200 meters away from Computex. And Nvidia has kind of taken over a couple of floors here and is throwing its own little conference. So Jensen Huang's keynote wasn't actually a Computex keynote. It was an Nvidia keynote staged in a different venue and not on the official Computex agenda. So there's a little bit of naughtiness going on here.
A little bit?
Not only
I mean,
that,
they're signing people's chests.
I was about to say, yes, there's something kind of creepy about that.
Yeah, look, there's something about boob signing that is deeply unsettling. I'm reminded of the British author Neil Gaiman, who once hit social media, I think Tumblr, back when Tumblr was a thing, and kind of said, "Thank God I'm now of an age and my fans are of an age, so I don't get asked to sign boobs anymore." And I kind of wish Jensen was at that stage.
Yeah, he's kind of gone the full Tony Stark, as you mentioned in your keynote coverage. It's just it's kind of bizarre. And this is a guy who used to walk out into the press pool after events and start taking questions. Now it's like he shows up late and starts eating a sandwich in front of everybody, complaining about it the whole time. It's just kind of bizarre. But I mean, we did get some really great chip disclosures, particularly from Nvidia, which, as it has been mentioned, didn't actually talk about that much new at Computex, or at their own keynote, rather. It was really more about talking about what you can do with their accelerators, because they're already there, and they're already the best ones that you can buy. And it's not just, having chips to sell. That's where everybody else is trying to get something competitive out in volume that people actually want. Everybody else is playing catch up. Whereas this is a really big power statement for Nvidia to say, hey, we don't have to, we already talked about our chips. We'll show you the ones that we announced. We'll talk about how they're cool, but here's all the cool stuff that you can do with them that you will have to go figure out how you're going to do that with everybody else's stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been tempting for him to come out on stage and just go, oh, and by the way, the value of our company now means I can buy you all, But what about Intel and AMD's plans? I mean, they're playing catch up, as you say, but is the architecture sounding like it's going to provide some decent competition in the market, at least?
I think so. I mean, the big takeaway for Intel on the Xeon side of things is that we're getting very close to them catching back up on core count. Ever since AMD launched EPYC back in 2017, Intel has been behind. If you wanted a lot of cores, AMD was the way to go. And yes, you could buy more sockets of Intel. That's always been true. AMD doesn't go beyond 2 sockets, and Intel will go to 8. But there's really only a couple companies that really are doing that, and they run giant databases. People really want these days really high core count, single socket servers. And that's really what we're getting. 144 cores is up there. It's more than anything AMD has for the moment. AMD did announce a 192 core chip as part of its Turin family that's coming sometime soon. Turin's coming this year. I don't know if we're going to get that 192 core chip this year or not.
And Intel's got plans, for a 288?
288 in Q1 of 2025. And, they've been keeping to their schedule. It's something that you couldn't take for granted with Intel for many, many years. They'd say one thing, and then the date would slip, and all of a sudden it's a year and a half later than it was supposed to launch, and you still don't know where the thing is. Gelsinger's been cracking the whip to get these chips out sooner and to iterate a lot faster. I mean, the chips that we got this week, they actually launched a chip. That 144 core chip launched this week. So that's also telling. They delivered on that promise to say we were going to give it in the first half of 2024, and they did it. They're going to go to 288 in Q1. In Q3 of this year, we're going to get a 128 core performance optimized part from Intel. That thing is going to be massive, 500 watt TDP potentially. It's huge.
Okay, I'm going to say this. As much as I find it quite exciting to have the idea of having 288 cores in one processor, we are talking about multiple dies within a processor package here, aren't we? Right? That's the thing. Because if you even go back a few years and tells people that there are 288 cores in this processor, most people would be like, "Oh, you mean it's just like a RISC-V thing, or it's a low-end ARM?" But these are proper Xeon cores. But the key thing here is that they are in. There are multiple dies within a package, right? Like the AMD style.
Correct. Intel has taken what AMD did years ago. They iterated on it, did a couple things different. They're using multiple I/O dies, whereas AMD continues to use one in their mainline CPU products. Instinct's a little bit different, but in their mainline CPU products, AMD has one I/O die, and Intel has gone with 2. And with the 288 core chip we're going to get next year, that will have a total of 5 chiplets on it. Right. And the performance optimized part we're getting in Q3 is going to also have 5.
Mm-hmm. It just makes me think of sometimes, like where you would get, and I'm talking about like much older computers, microcomputers in the 90s and maybe some 80s, where you could things like the Amiga, where you could take out the processor chip and you could plug instead a board, and that board will have multiple processors on it, and you just expand the machine through that. It just sort of feels like that. It's like, yes, it's a processor, but really it's just a platform of multiple processors that they just happen to, get to orchestrate and kind of coordinate together. I think it's quite, I don't know, I think it's quite fun. It's a nice way it's an interesting way. I mean, because otherwise the yield would be terrible, right?
Right. I mean, and granted, whereas you look at AMD stuff, the compute dies are actually very small, and so far the dies have been very similar, if not the same, as the ones found in their consumer platform. Intel has taken a different approach in that regard, and these dies are very large, all of them. Okay. And so they're not necessarily confining themselves to, our compute dies will have at most 16 cores. There are a lot of cores on these very large dies for Intel's upcoming Xeons.
Right. Okay.
Got it.
And switching up, like Simon, did you get your hands on any hardware, particularly things like the Qualcomm stuff?
Yeah, look, there are a lot of them around, and they're just PCs. I mean, you pick them up and they're just a PC. They're in a PC form factor and they're running Windows. It really isn't immediately apparent as you hold an AI PC that this is going to deliver an experience that improves on what you get from Windows every day. I had a really interesting conversation yesterday with Trend Micro, of all people. Who have developed security software for the AI PC. And they actually had a really interesting story to tell, I thought, because what they do when they scan your email and look for nasties is they use a model that runs in the cloud. And because it's in the cloud and because it's email, they have to give you a GDPR warning. And this is the sort of thing that gets users going, why should I click that? And so they don't take advantage of the cloud model to scan their emails. Now that they can run an on-device model, they don't have to give you that warning. The Trend guys that I spoke to just said, well, at last we take away this friction towards better security. And then he showed me the performance graph of the NPU, and it just kind of had a little blip every time an email came in. Totally wasn't taxed at all. And I was like, okay, well, great. You've built a 50 TOPS NPU, Qualcomm, and it's occasionally getting tickled by email.
Yeah, it's funny. All we heard on the consumer side of things was tops. It was Intel 48 NPU tops, AMD 50, Qualcomm has 45, I think. And so it's. But do you really need that, or is that really the major thing that we should be going after? And there's a certain element of you need the performance there in order to support software development, naturally. But also, just tell me, what are you going to do? Why do I care about these tops? Why do I care about these NPUs? And please tell me it's something better than recall.
Well, yeah, I mean, the tops limit. Sorry, Simon.
Yeah, look, Pat Gelsinger, CEO of Intel, actually kind of made this point. He said there's no benchmark for an AI PC or a Copilot Plus PC or whatever we're going to call these things. So apples to apples or PC to PC comparisons are very, very hard to do. And this is, going to be mightily confusing for the buying public because all they're being told is there's a thing called an AI PC or a Copilot Plus PC, and you should buy one because it's got AI. That ain't going to cut it for long.
Yeah, and also it doesn't make any much sense to kind of buy a machine that has, let's say it's got 50 TOPS of int 8 because, sign bytes aren't exciting enough. You've got to call it int 8. So it's got 50 TOPS of int 8 and no application will tax it that much. And then in 2 or 3 years' time, you're told to buy another PC by everybody. At least
that's a return to the 1990s.
Yeah, just sort of like, you just got you got way too much headroom on it, maybe, or not. But another thing about the TOPS thing is that it actually appears to try to be platform. It appears to be a way of comparing platforms, but in actual fact, you never quite know how much power is going behind it. So, for example, one vendor might say, "Oh, our chip can hit 50 TOPS." It's like, yeah, if you kind of give it, like full power. But if you're like in a laptop, you'd like your battery to last more than an hour. So there's that aspect as well. No one ever says there's no weighted TOPS. It's not weighted by power usage, which would be useful. I just, it's one of those interesting times where the hardware, it feels like, is way ahead of the software. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I agree. And I think it's all going to come down to the lowest common denominator. We're going to get a couple of years into this, and developers are going to look at, okay, so nobody bought these the first year. Nobody bought these the second year. Okay, the thing that came out the third year of the AI PC is going to be the thing that we're going to target for the next 5 years, because that's going to be what everybody has and what everybody can run. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to sell the software with a subscription that comes with it.
I just saw
and we've seen this movie before. Developers were slow to adopt hyper-threading, for example.
Okay, I've got one suggestion for for usage. If you're going to, you've got all these spare tops inside your machine, just build an LLM or some generative AI into your browser. And therefore, you don't actually have to witness the actual internet, which is filled with horrible things and horrible people. Just have your browser, just instead of typing search, just simply say, I want to have an internet where everybody just talks about crocodiles all the time. And that's all I see. I see news about crocodiles. I see pictures about crocodiles. The browser just generates it for me. And then, at least then I kind of get the internet that I kind of want. And I'll take that as a stopgap.
Couple that with VR glasses and you can have the entire world that you want.
Yeah, then it starts getting into Ready Player One, doesn't it?
Indeed. But Simon, you'll no doubt be on the ground next year. There'll be somebody pitching something like this, I'm sure.
I'd love to come back. The weather's been kind this year, so
usually it's torrential there.
Yeah, usually it's stinking here, but this year's been comfortable for once. But yeah, I'm totally up for coming back. Got to eat another one of those squid.
Sorry, I've just got this image of you walking down the street with your
That's what you do.
Excellent. Right, well, we'll have you back on in a year's time then to talk about talking about that, but we'll have you on certainly a lot sooner than that because you're always a favourite guest here. Thanks for joining us from Taiwan. Tobias and Chris, thank you again, and we'll be back next week.